Hello, world, and welcome back to another episode of us coding this podcast monitoring tool. So last time we backtracked a little bit, came back into the main project, created some of these scripts like the V branch here, and updated stuff in this work tracker. Laid out some of the work that we're going to want to do, as well as we introduced Mermaid to create this kind of quick flow chart of what the system is going to look like. And then we also got into the starting on this metadata class, this validated dict, and we added a unit test and some test code for it. So this time we're going to kind of continue on finishing up this metadata and creating this, similarly, this episode class. So let's get started. We'll switch over here to the feed metadata. Let's quickly check out some more recent commits. So as I kind of discussed, we have the we added the work tracker in so that the work tracker can kind of be like a branch specific thing. Created that V branch so that we can handle our virtual environment while we branch, and then created the diagram using Mermaid as well as filled out the tasks. So then we created the skeleton of this as well as some initial code for the metadata and added some of this validation. We also added this get item here, which allows us to directly access this dictionary that we have here that we get using the key value. We can do that same method from this metadata thanks to this get item, which is simply grabbing from the data. So we have a bunch of these kind of tests in here and some of the errors that we kind of throw. So I think we're going to end up actually removing this one here. But let's kind of try to do this in a bit of a test-driven development sort of way. So I'm going to kind of alter some of these, or well, I guess really just kind of add them. I'm not going to remove it entirely. Because I am going to have it fail before I actually delete it. But we're going to end up getting rid of this one here. So right now we have this test create, which creates which basically tests that, verifies that we're able to create a feed that metadata. We also going to want another test. We'll go test copies data. So this will be actually kind of partially what this test is also doing. So this test here is not only creating one, verifying I can do that, but it's also then trying to alter it and verifying that it can't be altered. So we're going to add a test for that. The test no name, test no URL. We'll also add another one, test no type, because that's the last piece of information that we're going to add in here. And we're going to add a couple more, test bad URL and test bad type. So let me just kind of shorten these for a second. So basically, what are we doing? What is this test proving? It proves that we can create we're able to create that it copies the data, data can't be altered, that there's going to be an errors. So I feel like I should actually make these a little more specific, but test that there's an error on no name or no type. So let's say error on, or exception. We'll say exception on no name. And then we'll say test exception on no URL, test exception on no type. test exception on bad URL, test exception on bad type. I'm just gonna leave those as those are kind of named there. So okay, now we need to basically fill in all this information. What I'm gonna say is I'm gonna add. So all right, well let's start up the virtual environment. By the way, make sure we do that. Scripts activate. All right, and then let's run this real quick. All right, all 7 tests pass. So now let's go ahead and make sure a bunch of these tests fail. And in fact, I'll just leave that there for now. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this metadata thing, the creation of this dictionary, into the setup. And so we'll say self. Just so it's kind of accessible everywhere. And so we'll say, what was it, type main. So that'll be just like the most basic version of this. And we'll add this in here. And we'll remove these 2 lines. So all this test is doing is verifying that I can create a metadata. I don't even need to save it in anything. So we'll just have that there. We'll add these lines in down here. We'll need this. And then we'll say metadata. Okay, so this first test just basically verifies that we can create, given data that is correct, we can create a feed metadata. The second one creates that same feed metadata and then tries to change the name of it in this dictionary up here. By the way, so the setups here that are being used, they're going to run for, setup and teardown is going to run for all of these. So it's not going to be, the fact that I'm changing this dictionary here isn't going to alter any of the other tests. It will run in isolate. The assert here, so verifying that this name is still the same as this name up here and hasn't been changed to this value here. Then we're going to say exception no name, and so I'm thinking maybe it'd be nice. I guess let's write out all the tests and then we can decide if we want to create another kind of method to drop stuff. So here's where we're gonna have to do this. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this metadata. So what we're gonna say is self metadata delete. I know, is it? Oh, it's. We're going to delete the name attribute. And then we're going to, in here, pass self.metadata. If there's a key error, throw an exception. So if name doesn't exist, we should get a key error. If there's any other sort of error, then this will fail. In fact, if there's any sort of other kind of error in here, it actually shouldn't. So if we get, say, for example, we get a type error here. So if we got a type error that came out of this, it would try and get a type error, but it only catches this. So the exception should actually come all the way out. I'm going to... Those are all fine. Let's just run this real quick. All right, all 7 tests pass. I'm going to force this one. I'm going to force it to fail. And I'm going to say... also... So let's just remove this for a second. So now we're gonna get a bunch of test failures. Need to let's pass back in. And so, yeah, so we get these different errors. Exception on, no name. False is not true. Exception on, no name. No key error was thrown. So now I'm going to throw a type error. I'm just going to raise type error. And no name. So yeah, so see, it calls the validate, and then we have the raise type error, and we get a type error. So this one, it doesn't actually catch it, so this assert doesn't actually hit. So I don't think, instead of structuring it this way, we can actually clean this up and say, okay, let's get rid of this here. Self.assert true. False. So basically, oh no, we want this to be true. Actually, so I guess we do want that because, well, I guess, is there a, we can put an else, right? Okay, actually, let's do this. So this should then hit that. Accept pass. That might not be how else's work. I don't typically use. So let's get rid of this. Rerun it. No name. Okay, so okay. False is not true. All right, so I think we're going to leave it like this because, so basically what we have here is, right, we create the metadata, we don't have the name. So if there is a key error, so basically if this is what it is, the test will pass. So see, we only got the one failure for the no URL because we removed this one here. So if it is there, this test will pass because it does throw a key error, and so this passes. But if no key error comes, then we get the else, and then we hit this assertion is true. So it does the same thing as this. It's one less line. And it doesn't seem to have any, and there's no actual change. It seems between if it's a different type, right? So if it was that type error here, it doesn't actually go into the else, it still just raises the type error. So there's not a big difference in what we're doing with it. And so we're still raising that type error. So let's go to that. But at least this is kind of somewhat cleaner. And so let's do the same thing for, we'll leave that in. The same thing for no URL. So we'll delete URL. And then we'll do the same thing. So obviously, since we're doing the same thing a whole bunch of times, we should be able to kind of create another helper method that'll then parameterize this. So let's move type. All right, so now the last thing we have is actually similar to this here, where if well, so this one here is actually like so this is a type error. So what type of error, we have to figure out what type of error we kind of want to throw if it's not necessarily the wrong type. So it could be the wrong type, or it could be a bad, like just not a URL. So if it's something that's just not, like if it's just some random string that's not a URL, we'd want to raise, let's see what errors we have. Key error, name, type, index. So it'd probably be a value error. Kind of looks like it makes the most sense. Yeah, so I think raise a value. And then so that the other thing is, should we also validate that, so should we do separate tests or the same test to verify that the type, right? So basically what I'm saying is, so here we have, instead we're going to go self.metadata and URL, and let's say we just have it equal to a number, right? So that's obviously not a URL. So then if we try the metadata equals to feed metadata, and give it this, we're going to have except type error. Otherwise, insert that. The other thing we could have, so we could do separate tests for this, or we're just doing the same test. URL, so it is going to be a string, so it's not going to be a type error, but not a URL, but a sentence. And like, we're gonna have super basic validations for this. I mean, we're not trying to get crazy. We control the data, but so we could say, I'm just gonna copy this. So create this, and instead we're gonna get a value error. And then, so we're gonna do the same thing here. I don't even know if we care. I'm going to remove this. I don't know if we care about that. We'll just do the one type. Other value error. Save this. Okay. So now we have this whole suite of tests. In theory, if these all pass, what we end up having should be good. So let's run it. We get 5 failures. So so I'll say broken. So I'm going to commit this. Added all feed metadata UTs. All right. So a clean. If we run this, we get 5 failures. So now we got to get these failures to pass. So let's just go through them one by one. I'm going to do the no ones first. So test exception on no URL, right? So that's this one here. So we don't give it a URL, so we expect a key error. So in that case, we can just add that back in, which is this. I mean, basically, so if it's trying to access this, you get a key error. I feel like should we verify that it's a dictionary? So what I'm thinking is, like, should we do like def test bad create feed metadata self and we just say self.metadata This is going to throw an error. Let's see, where is this one? String attribute error. I'm going to leave this for now. Okay, so back to where we were. All right, so ran this. Now we have 4 failures because he fixed one of them. Test exception on no type. So we'll say s type equals self type. Okay, now we're down to 3. No name. It's this one. And that back in. Test exception on bad URL. So we want to get a. So there's 2 errors in this one, right? So the first one is line 49. That's this one. So we want to get a type error if it's not, if this is in a string. So that's basically this one that we have here, except instead of using name, we're going to use URL. And we're going to say URL is whatever type it is. Should be class string. So let's run that. And now we have the other one on line 62. No, actually it's this one. Line 55. Which is this one, a value error. So we should get a value error if something like this is passed. And so what we're going to say is, like, as a basic test is that, like, if HTTPS not in SURL raise value error. URL should be just say something like that. So now we should get 1 test failure, and this last one is the the value error that we have for getting an other. Now, if we look at the data real quick, we only have main and sub. So basically, in here, we're just going to say if s.type not in main sub raise value error. Type so basically we're just saying, so s.type is either has to be this string or it has to be this string. So we're actually kind of getting the type error in here too. So if you gave it like a number, anything that's just not one of these 2 strings will raise an error. All right, so now let's come back over here. Everything should now pass. Great. So now we'll say git commit and fixed updated feed metadata, so all UTs pass. All right, now I left this around for a second. So now basically we're not going to get this sort of error here. So see, now we don't get this key, or what is this? Oh, actually we're getting a different one because of this. So if we tried to like kind of fix this up, so we just like type main, and now we run it. Doesn't throw the error because we're not verifying that this can't be 1, which is fine. I feel like while it wouldn't be, there's no need for the name to be anything specific necessarily. What we really care about is the name as like a unique ID, the URL as being a valid URL, and the type being for our logic purposes later on, one of those sub or main. Okay, so now we remove that. So if we go git diff, we'll see that, okay, we remove that, so let's commit that. removed unused test name, no, str. All right, so let's clean this up a little bit. All right, and then so last thing we have is basically, why don't we abstract out the kind of the commonality here, right? So basically, if we look at this specifically, we have this one. If you pull out the error, we have it 1, 2. Basically, every single one of these is the same. Every single one of these is taking self.metadata, given in an error. So we can add a method, and so we'll add it up here, and we'll say def verify exception raised, and we'll say basically this is just what we need to do here. So we're going to go try metadata equals feed metadata given, so given metadata dictionary as however it is, exception except, okay, I should spell this right, except exception is pass, otherwise show true. So now what we can do is we can come into here and we can basically say self.verify exception raised key error. And so if we do that, right, so now we've simplified this to just delete the name, verify the key error exception is raised, and that logic is there. So it becomes even cleaner to do, and because it's named like this. You look at this, you go verify exception raised, given this exception. So you try to do something, accept exception, otherwise that. So it kind of really like abstracts that out in an easy to understand way. So let's come back in here and we should run it and it should pass. Now let's make it fail just to verify that this kind of structure that we're doing still works. So if we come in here and we remove this, now the test should fail because no exception is being thrown. So it should go and have the assert. And so see, so we get this assert in the verify the exception. We get that assert in the else there from the tests there. So everything is working, so that's good. And it's nice that we can kind of just pass in this exception here because now we can come in, we can just copy this. This is also a key error. Remove those, copy this, also a key error. Copy it again. Now we have the type error as well as the value error. And we can remove these extra lines of code. And last one, add in here, also the value error, so we can just remove these last bits of code. So now we have shortened everything, much nice and simpler, the different kind of errors that are in here. So let's run it. Everything passes, and let's just verify real quick some things like, let's put a type error in here. And so you see now, we aren't catching that exception, we're getting a different one. So it's not asserting because we're getting a different error than the one we gave it. So instead of we're getting a value error instead of the type error. And so that error is actually kind of coming up and through. So everything looks to be good. So let's commit this. Abstracted UT exception into helper method. Great. All right. So yeah, so I think that kind of is nice and clean and kind of gives all of the things that we really kind of need to do here. I think we can come in and so right now in progress we're creating the validator for the metadata. So we basically completed that. And the next thing we have to do is the episodes. Now we were specifically on our specific branch here is for 7. So that's actually this whole deliverable. So we're not going to worry about committing everything yet until we complete these other 2 things. So we'll mark this one now in progress because that's not what we're on. If we look at the diff, we just kind of updated those lines. So git commit, updated tasks in work tracker. And so yeah, so let's just kind of go over this real quick, and we'll finish all this up. So what do we have? We have a FeedMetadata class, which basically can take in a dictionary and validate it. And then you can access it using this sort of notation, which is this notation here, because of this get item. And so what do we validate? We validate that it has a name, it has a URL, it has a type. The URL is a string that contains HTTPS. The type is a string that's either main or sub. And so testing-wise, we verify that we can create it using a dictionary like this, that if we alter this dictionary after we've created it, it doesn't propagate into the metadata itself. We've also verified that you get a key error if you don't include a name, URL, or type. You'll get a type error if the URL is not a string, and a value error if it doesn't contain HTTPS. And then you'll get a value error if this is anything other than those 2, right? So we basically just we're just verifying all the things that were validated in that method. So we can complete this. So yeah, so we were able to basically complete that task, and next time we're going to be able to move on to this other one. So we'll close those out for now. We're now going to be on creating the episodes, which are going to be copies of those. So I'll end up kind of using those as like a boilerplate to make that go nice and fast. And then we can move into the kind of the bundled object. So I'm going to open up the log real quick. And so basically, what did we do this time? We did all these commits, added the UTs, updated the class, and then we kind of did some cleanup on these last few. So I'm just going to tag this, git tag, episode 6. And now if we check out the log one more time, we'll see we tagged that there. So yeah, so that is that's going to be everything for today. Next time we're going to get into a little bit more of the class stuff, and then when we finish off this deliverable, we'll get into actually parsing, using the actual feed, pulling it into this class that we now created, and then using this class and these other classes to grab the information, parse it, and throw it in there. So hope that was interesting. Until next time, see ya.